That being said, Song of Solomon, second to last week, we've got this week, and then next week we're talking about this text out of this book in the Bible that just kind of doesn't seem to have its place. It's out there, it's different, it's weird, but it's really cool at the same time. And it's interesting, as you reflect upon this book, as you read through it, as you start to understand and process some of the passages that we're in. I mean, look, again, it's a book of poetry. Not many of us are fluent in the language of poetry, myself included, so it is a bit of a stretch. We've talked about these two lovers meeting one another, seeing each other from a distance, and then meeting one another. We talked about the courtship process and how she took him home to meet her parents. We talked about the marriage ceremony. We talked about the consummation of that marriage ceremony. And let's be honest, up to this point in this book, this whole relationship between this man and woman has been nothing but rainbows and butterflies, right? I mean, it's been the happy, woohoo, this is good, infatuation type of stuff. And yet many of us don't live in the rainbow and butterfly world all the time, do we? We can't go to Disney 365 days out of the year. And just as tension invades many of our lives and our relationships, that's exactly what's about to happen to this couple today. And I mean, think about it. You're talking about a guy, Solomon. It was bound to happen, wasn't it? This guy who eventually ended up with 700 wives and 300 concubines. You're going to have tension in relationships. But there's something I want to point out before we get into that this morning that I think is very important, because if you read through this passage, if you were paying attention and you focused in on what was actually being said, there's not a whole lot of stuff in this book that's negative about Solomon, is there? I mean, we're going to get into some stuff this week in this chapter, or these two chapters especially, that make the woman look kind of bad. But you never see anything bad written about Solomon. Okay, I don't want to gloss over that point because I think it's important. Now, we don't know exactly why that's happening. I think one of the reasons, and probably the main reason, could be that Solomon was king of Israel, which meant he was essentially the most powerful man in the world at that time. When you are the most powerful man in the world, there's not a whole lot of people who are willing to stick out their necks and risk writing something bad about you. This was not a free democracy at the time, right? This is a dictatorship of the king. And guess what happened if you said something about the king that people didn't like? The king had the authority to bring down upon you whatever justice he felt necessary. So not a whole lot of people are going to write negative aspects or things about the king. That could be one reason. It could be because the man was viewed as the head of the household at that time, and then the wife would not write such things, or people would not write such things about the men, but they would the wife. Like, we really don't know exactly why and for sure this happened, but it definitely was happening. And I say that because I want everybody in this room to understand one simple concept that I believe to be true. There is no such thing as an ideal. Let me phrase that. There is an ideal. There's no such thing as a perfect marriage. There is no such thing as a perfect marriage, because a marriage involves two people, two imperfect people. And you can't put imperfect and get perfect together. It is a physical impossibility. Maybe there's some situations where two negatives make a positive or two wrongs make a right, but this is not one of them. I bring that up because, look, ever since the time you were young, you watched a Disney movie, you heard a fairy tale, it always ends with what? And they lived happily ever after. Rainbows and butterflies. It's so warm and fuzzy, isn't it? I love it. No, I don't. It makes me want to gag. Think about it, though. That's what we're used to. Look, I bring that up because Solomon is portrayed as perfect in this passage. Solomon is portrayed as the one having no wrong within him, and yet the woman does. So, ladies, obviously you should take some offense to this, but I want to frame it in a bigger perspective. What is the larger perspective of the book of Song of Solomon? Christ and the church. So if Christ and the church are represented in the larger portion here, Solomon represents Christ, the woman represents the church. And we believe that Jesus Christ was perfection, wasn't he? That he did live a holy and perfect life. And so if Christ lived a holy and perfect life, and that is represented as Solomon in this book, we know that we as the church do not always live holy and perfect, do we? I mean, 99.9% of the times, obviously, right? It's a joke. Think about it, though. When you put it in proper perspective, when you put it as Solomon represents Christ, the woman represents the church, yes, Solomon does represent more perfection at that point, and the woman, yes, does represent more imperfection at that point. But I think it's important to understand that. I think it's important to look over that. The problem does not lie with Christ. Christ was without sin. He was perfection. But the church, unfortunately, does. But we begin this passage in verse 2, chapter 5, verse 2. I slept, but my heart was awake. Listen, my lover is knocking. It's a problem, isn't it? It's a dilemma. And it's one that I think we all encounter. And I love the way it's worded in here. Chapter 5, verse 2. I slept, but my heart was awake. Is that true for us? Did you ever sleep, but your heart was awake? I think it is. I mean, when you've got something that is weighing on your mind, when you've got something that maybe stresses you out, when you've got something big that's about to occur, do you lay down in bed and you're like, oh, I'm so tired? Not for the most part. You lay down in bed, and even if your eyes are closed, your mind is racing. I think that's exactly what was going on here. My heart was awake, even though my body was asleep. And we all have dreams, don't we? Where do dreams come from? I wrote about in your bulletin. I did some really quick research this week. But when you look up dreams and the origin of dreaming in a biblical context, what's fascinating is I can only find one verse that really relates to it. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 3. We all know who wrote Ecclesiastes. The same guy we're dealing with in this book, Solomon, wrote Ecclesiastes. And Solomon wrote these words. A dream comes when there are many cares. Like I said, when you've got something on your mind, it's difficult to sleep. I mean, I always, and maybe I've used this illustration before, every year, I played football in high school. Every year, without fail, before the first day of practice, Sunday night, I would go to bed, had to be at the school at like 6:30 Monday morning for football practice. Invariably, every year, I would have the same dream that one night. And that dream was that I was slow. It was basically like I would go to practice, I'd be excited, I'd be good. Like my mind was at practice. I'm like, all right, cool. But it was like I was playing in mud and everybody else was playing on a track. I could not move. It was like somebody tied 20-pound concrete blocks to my feet. And so every step for me was super slow. I was slow to get to the ball. I was getting knocked all over the place. Coaches are yelling at me, you're lazy, you're stupid, you're tired, pick it up. And I'm going, I'm trying as hard as I can. Every year, the day before football started, I had that exact same dream. And every year, the night after first practice, I would literally wake up in a cold sweat. Wake up thinking, thank you, Lord, that was just a dream and I can actually still play. Because I was dreaming I was getting kicked off the team. And then that night, Monday night, after our first practice, guess how I slept? Like a baby, right? Because my fears were allayed. They were alleviated. They were taken off me. Every year, sometime in the couple weeks leading up to hunting season, I always have the same hunting dream. Isn't that weird? Because I have a friend in Lancaster named Rod Ball, and oftentimes I go hunting at Rod Ball's farm. And every year, I have a dream that I'm hunting at Rod Ball's farm. Only in my dream, it's not his farm. It's a different place that I've never been to that I don't even know exists. But in my dream, I'm going, wow, this makes sense. I'm at Rod's farm, even though I'm not at Rod's farm. And every year, I don't get a deer in my dream, which is a nightmare, right? But you have recurring dreams. Some of us do. Or you have dreams when you're stressed. Our dreams come when there are many cares. That's what Solomon writes, and I believe that's exactly what's going on. So with that being the context, what is this woman's dream saying to her? Open to me, my sister, my darling. Open, my dove, my flawless one. My head is drenched with dew, my hair with the dampness of the night. I have taken off my robe. Must I put it on again? I have washed my feet. Must I soil them again? What is being said here is actually an issue and a problem that many of us face in our marriages and relationships in general. She hears her lover knocking. Please come let me in. He just wants to be let in the door. And listen to the loving terms that he uses. He doesn't just say, can you please come open the door? What's he say? Open to me, my sister, my darling, my dove, my flawless one. Man, women, wouldn't you love to be called the flawless one by your husband? This is good stuff, right? You'd be like, wait, who are you? Because you're not my husband. I'm definitely not opening the door for you. He is flattering her with his words. Can you feel the love tonight, right? And what is her response? Look at her response. I have taken off my robe. Must I put it on again? I have washed my feet. Must I soil them again? In other words, are you serious? That's her response, right? I'm at the door. My love, my darling, my perfect, flawless, beautiful one. Can you please come open it? Unlock it for me so I can come inside. Are you serious? I just got cleaned up. I just laid down. I put my robes on. I'm clean. Do I have to get up and do that again? And seriously, I just washed off my feet. If I go to the door, what's going to happen? I'm going to get dirt on my feet, and I'm going to have to clean them up again. That's exactly what she's saying. Really? Do you really want me to do this for you? And what might her motives be to this response? I don't know. Because let's be honest, we can't always pin this all on the woman, can we? I mean, maybe Solomon was 3 hours late when he was making this request, right? Yeah, I'll be home at 5 o'clock, and it's 8 o'clock. She's a little chapped. That happens. Maybe she had a rough day, and she was exhausted, and she had just crashed. And it's like, Solomon, seriously, can't you take care of some of this business by yourself? I mean, there could be many factors involved with why she feels this way. And I don't disagree with this. However, it's interesting to me to notice how a couple treats one another over a period of time. And what I mean is simply this. When I'm doing premarital counseling with a couple, when a couple comes into my office, first off, they need to get past the fact that it's a pastor's office and they can actually talk and open up without being scared of what I'm going to say or tell them, right? Once they do that, the couple is very affectionate towards one another. They're very loving. They're very doting would be a good word. I mean, they're very oriented towards serving one another. What can I do to help you out? They're pulling out the chairs, opening up the doors, getting one another a drink. Things of that nature, right? Serving one another. Now, when a couple comes in who's been married for 30 years, is it a similar response? Oftentimes, it's much different. And I'm not going to say the level of love is greater or different. What I'm going to say is the level of service is vastly changed. Because at this point, we know our roles and our responsibilities, what is expected and not expected of us. And this response that you get from the woman seems like somebody who's been in a relationship for a much longer period of time than this couple has been together. The problem is not that she doesn't love him anymore. Let me say it again. The problem is not that she doesn't love him anymore. If she didn't love Solomon, she wouldn't have been dreaming. She wouldn't have been stressed out about the situation. It wouldn't have caused this much anxiety in her heart. And she wouldn't have done what? Proceeded to get up and go through the process of looking for him after this happens. I mean, look, if you remember, if this passage sounds familiar, if you turn back a chapter or 2 chapters to chapter 3, verses 2 and 3, what's it say? I will get up now and go about the city, through its streets and squares. I will search for the one my heart loves. So I looked for him, but I did not find him. The watchmen found me as they made their rounds in the city. It's a similar experience to one that she has already discussed and talked about and had. In that case, she walked through town, she found the watchmen and asked them to help her. In this case, it's slightly different. What happens in verse 7? The watchmen found me as they made their rounds in the city. They beat me, they bruised me, they took away my cloak. They physically abused her. So what was the difference between these two experiences? In the first experience in chapter 3, her and Solomon were not wed yet. She was still pursuing him. She was still going after him. At this experience, they had already been wed. And she is obviously anxious about something within their marriage, and she is still very much in love with him because we know that by her response. But what was she anxious about? We don't know exactly for sure what she was anxious about. But we know that she has a moment of clarity, a moment of realization, a moment of epiphany, if you want to call that, where she's laying in her bed, and Solomon leaves, and she goes, what have I done? Otherwise, she would not be looking for him in the first place. But what causes this? I'm guessing if you would turn back to chapter 2, verse 15, we talked about this 3 weeks ago. Catch the little foxes that ruin the vineyards. We talked about this phrase, to catch the little foxes that ruin the vineyards, and what does it mean? And oftentimes the foxes in the vineyards are small, annoying problems that fester and build up. and turn into big problems if you don't take care of them right away. That's probably what was going on to her. Can anyone else relate to this experience? Here's what I mean. I know I can, and I know most of you can. But check it out. When I come home from work every night, or whatever night it is that I come home from work, right? And my wife has been with the kids all day long because they no longer have school because there's a chance of flurries. Sorry. Anyway, right? That's terrible. My wife's been home with the kids all day, and she's making supper. And I come home. I am emotionally and spiritually spent. I'm exhausted. Not physically, but emotionally. And I come home, she's physically spent, as well as emotionally and mentally spent, right? But guess what? Dinner needs made. The table needs set. Stuff needs cleaned up. The trash needs taken out. Somebody needs to pick up the dog poop. And on and on and on and on, right? Now, what are the choices at that point? Laura, you're doing a great job. I'm going to go crash, right? Let me know. Just ring the bell when dinner's ready. And there are times when I do that, right? Most of the times I ask first, right? Is it okay if I go lay down? Because I like to keep my relationship where it's at. Right? But how often do we see something that needs done and avoid it out of convenience? Because if we don't do it, somebody else will have to do it, even though it would go a long way towards helping that person out. And then finally, after we eat dinner and after things are cleaned up and after the kids are done fighting and done showering and done brushing their teeth and going to the bathroom and we finally put them to bed and it's time for us, what do? Exactly. We read a book, we watch TV, we zone out because we're so spent at that point, we just want to crash. Or we flat out fall asleep. I know I'm not the only one who goes through that process on a regular basis. What I'm saying is at that point, my desire is not to serve my spouse. Is it? Absolutely not. But we must ask right now at this point, what is the greater message to the Church of Christ? Not the marital message, but what is the greater message to the Church of Christ? Our love and our passion for Jesus Christ should be our number one focus. What are the things in your life that crowd out your passion for Him? I mean, are we more concerned with issues that lie within the church that hold really very little or very minimal eternal impact than we are the ones we should be focusing on? Are we focused on the fact that Pastor Scott's wearing a football jersey on a Sunday morning and that is not appropriate for pastors to be preaching in a football jersey? Are we focused on the fact that we don't have a choir at this church and we really need to get a choir? Maybe we're focused on the fact that the decorations in the sanctuary haven't been changed in 15 years. How could we do something like that, right? The very low, very little, very minimal eternal impact issues are not the ones that we need to be focused on, but they're the ones that fester, and they're the ones that build, and they're the ones that are the foxes ruining the vineyards. Are you more concerned with politics in the state of our nation than you are with Christ? What I'm asking essentially is, are you neglecting the vertical issues and focusing on the horizontal issues? The horizontal issues don't have an eternal impact, and the vertical ones do. There's a great emphasis, there's a great story about this in the Bible. Many of you have heard it before. It's found in the book of John, chapter 12, verses 1 through 8. I'm going to read through it. It says this: 6 days before the Passover, Jesus arrived at Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. That alone makes it a great story, doesn't it? Hey, let's go have dinner with the dead guy who's now alive, right? Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of the disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. Leave her alone, Jesus replied. It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. When Christ is our center, our priorities will be properly aligned. Thus much the inverse is true. When Christ is not our center, it is near impossible to align your priorities. But the same thing is also true about marriage and relationships, isn't it? When your marriage or your relationships are out of order, can the rest of your life be consistent? I mean, really, can you have a good life at home and be driving to work and be going, yeah, everything's fine. I'm out of the house now. It's all good, right? Or when you get to work and your relationship with others and people you work with and people that you serve, right? Yeah, relationship at home stinks right now, but I'm happy to be with you. The inverse is true as well. When your relationship is home, you don't go to work, great at home, you don't go to work, go, oh, I hate the world. Do you? It carries over. Our relationships. You need consistency in your life. I bring this up because I think that's the significance of the watchman in this dream. When everything is out of sorts, it just doesn't make any sense that the first time she went through the city and they were happy to help her, and then this time they went through the city and they physically abused her. She has allowed things to get in the way of their marriage, and now nothing feels right. Her life is out of alignment. Another point, a second point that we need to make about this dream is the response of Solomon. And you're going, wow, Scott, it's 21 after. You need to get cooking. We're going to here, right? If it takes this long for those couple verses. All right. This is the response of Solomon. What did Solomon do? Look, there's three ways that people usually respond in a crisis. Put yourself in Solomon's situation. I want in the door, my beautiful, my love, my darling, my one and only. Shut it. I just got into bed. Do it yourself. That's the response. How is Solomon usually treated? What do we do? Okay, no problem, right? Absolutely not. First thing we usually do, we tuck it away, we lock it up, and we hold a grudge. Yeah, you just wait till the next time you need something. See what happens then. See if I'm so willing to serve you and help you out. Second thing we do is we pull a power trip. Woman, I am the head of this household. Open the door now. I hope you don't do it quite like that. But in Solomon's day and time, he could have very well said that, and it would have been accepted by the populace. Third thing we do, we give the silent treatment. Okay, it's cool. There's no problem. Just not going to really talk to you or have a conversation with you. Maybe it's the complete silent treatment. Maybe it's just the silent treatment enough where the other person knows something is wrong, but you're not going to admit it. You can play that game so it digs at him and digs at him and digs at him, right? And y'all are smiling because you know this is what we do. But what was Solomon's response? What did he do? The great thing about Solomon is he simply went on about his business. He went to another task. The reason she couldn't find him when she was looking for him is not because he was running away. The reason she couldn't find him is because he was already busy doing something else. It was a dream, but it was probably also indicative of Solomon's character in real life, because that's often how dreams work, don't they? Otherwise, there would have been hints of jealousy, hints of anger, or hints of rage, and there was none. Does retaliation help a situation, or does retaliation hurt a situation? We all know the answer, and let's be honest, Solomon wasn't the wisest man alive for nothing. He shows it in times like this. Look, Solomon wasn't just wise about issues with money. Solomon wasn't just wise about issues with budgeting or things of that. Solomon was wise because of how he treated people, because of how he reacted to certain circumstances and situations. Proverbs chapter 24, verse 3 says these words, "By wisdom a house is built, and through understanding it is established." Solomon is aware that retaliation is not have any room in this relationship. So he simply went on to another task. Many of us learn this lesson more the hard way, don't we? It is evident that Solomon didn't act in kind in this situation. Solomon acted in love. It isn't true that an act of love is more beneficial than 100 acts of retaliation. I mean, if you really want to positively impact a person's life, it can only be done through love. It can only be done through love. That's the power of love. All right, you're rocking out here. It's cool. Thank you. What is fascinating about this concept? Yeah, we're going back to the 80s. It's all good, man. What's fascinating about this concept is many of it thinks, when I bring this up now, they're going, yeah, my partner really needs to hear this message. The person I'm married to really needs to hear this. Guess what? So do we. So do you. The problem isn't always with the other person. So what was one of the main factors that won her to Solomon in the first place? Turn back to chapter 2, verse 4. She says, his banner over me is love. She precedes that by saying in 2:3, I delight to sit in his shade, and his fruit is sweet to my taste. Their marriage rested not, listen to this, their marriage rested not upon the nobility of his crown. Their marriage rested upon the nobility of his love. That's good stuff. And that's the thing. If you look to the earlier dream, she was assisted by the watchman. She was assisted by the guards on the tower. In this dream, she cannot find him. And what is her one message to him? In verse 8. What will you tell my lover? What will you tell him? Tell him I am faint with love. All is lost for her without his love. I mean, a good example of this for the church would be the Reformation. And for those of you who don't know what the Reformation was, I'm going to take you back about 400 to 500 years. In the 1500s and 1600s, this thing called the Reformation happened. And what was the Reformation? It's a big word to mean that people stopped having a corporate encounter with God and started having a personal experience with God. Okay, the church used to be a state-sponsored religion. You lived in an area, you went to this church, you were a Christian. Why were you a Christian? Because you showed up at that church every Sunday at this time. If you didn't do it, we'd put you in prison. We'd beat you. We'd torture you. We'd do all this stuff to you because this is what people in this country do. But as long as you go to that church on a Sunday morning, you're a Christian. Guys like John Calvin came along and Arthur Zwingli came along and they said, whoa, I don't get that when I read through the Bible. This is not so much of you have to do this as much as an intimate relationship with a God who loves you and cares for you. And when they started with that concept, that was what was called the Reformation, reforming what Christianity and spirituality was to them. And when they started with this concept, people were like, whoa, that's dangerous stuff. A lot of people got killed and crucified over this. A lot of martyrs happened because of this. There was a lot of persecution because you're threatening the status quo. But what happened is the church had lost its way, hadn't it? The church became less personal. The church became something we did. But when the Reformation started, the church poured their hearts into worship. They poured their hearts into prayer. They had a personal connection with God again instead of simply connecting through association. And the relationship with God and the church was reset. There was fresh life. There was vibrancy. That seems to be what's happening in here. How do I know? Listen to how she describes him, or just read how she describes him in verses 10 through 16. I mean, here's the cool thing. Side note, Jeopardy, trivia, if you ever get on that, somebody asks you what the color of Solomon's hair was, what are you going to say? Black. It's right there. Well played, Ernie. Black, jet black, dark as a raven. So I'm helping you out. If you ever win big money on that, I expect a cut. It's all good. Unless it's Ernie, because he already knew the answer. All right? What we know is he had described her beauty twice before this passage, but she had never described his. But why would she describe it here and now? His looks haven't changed, have they? But his love for her is now more evident than at any point in their relationship. She sees it, she acknowledges it. 1 John chapter 4, verse 19 says these words, we love because he first loved us, in reference to Christ. Isn't that what's happening here? She loves because she is loved. The deeper your awareness is for the love of Christ, the deeper and more appreciative is your admiration for him, and the greater your desire to reciprocate that love. Then we get to chapter 6. In the text, again, we are faced with a rhetorical question in verse 1 to begin with. Where is he gone? Which way did your lover turn that we may look for him with you? It doesn't matter necessarily who asked it. We got into that before. What I want to stress again is the covenantal aspect of marriage. The covenantal aspect. Marriage was an institution that was created, designed, given, and ordained by God, with him as the head. Somebody who's not in a marriage, if you were to ask them, where is your lover? Where's your boyfriend or girlfriend? Where is this person? You get one or two responses. Either the super controlling response, I know where they are every minute of the day, and who wants to be in a relationship with somebody like that? Not many people, right? Or they're free to live their own life. Who am I? Their guard? I don't keep track over them. Is that your response with the church? Look, it's not being able to say that life is happy and perfect all the time, because let's be honest, life isn't always happy and perfect. That there are never any disagreements, that there are never any quarrels or arguments. It's being able to say that you know where the other person is. What's she say in verse 3? I am my lover's, and my lover is mine. I am his, and he is mine. I mean, it always cracks me up because my wife is so great, and she's so good with communicating, and she'll get up, well, in some aspects, right? But she never uses my phone without asking. We don't have a landline, we just have cell phones, right? And, Scott, can I use your phone for something? Scott, can I check this text? Well, yeah, you're my wife. The only reason that I can think of for her to not be allowed to check my phone is what? If there's something on there I don't want her to see in the first place, right? That's the only possible reason I can think of. So it makes me laugh every time she asks. I'm like, why do you keep asking? Just use the phone, right? I haven't ordered any lingerie for you lately or anything like that. We're all good. Yep, that's right. Her face is going to get red, and that's why I said it. But think about it. Why else would you object to that response? There's no other possible reason that I can think of. I am my lover's, and he is mine. What I have is hers. What she has is mine. There are no secrets. This is how it was intended to be by God in spite of his trials and struggles. And so it is for the church as well. Jesus Christ said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. In spite of our failures, in spite of our imperfections, God has chosen the church. How do we know this? Because his response is the same as Solomon. When she finds him, what does he do? If you read verses 4 through 9, he praises her. He lifts her up. He tells her how beautiful she is. Again, this is the woman who locked him out, who didn't want to get out of her comfort zone just to unlock the door and let him in. Isn't it interesting? This text is far less sensual than last week. This isn't a sexual thing. This is him telling her how wonderful she is. This is called agape love, the kind that doesn't ask what one can give or what one can reciprocate. It doesn't depend on the beauty of the object. It depends on the character of the one who does the loving. Agape love. The kind of love that Christ has for the church as well. One of my favorite movies of all time, and I've told you this before, is The Princess Bride, and now my kids have gotten kind of hooked on it too. It's a simple movie about a simple issue, but it starts off at the beginning. And what you have is you have a farm boy named Wesley, and you have the object of his desire, his affection, a princess, or she's not a princess, but a girl at that time named Buttercup, right? And the narrator's narrating, he's doing his thing, and Buttercup keeps getting Wesley to do things for him, right? Even simple things. And every time he does something, every time she makes a request, and he fulfills that request, his simple words to her are, as you wish. Right? And of course, he says it in like the dramatic flair, as you wish, right? And then the narrator tells us that when he was saying, as you wish, what he was really saying to her was, I love you. But what was more amazing was the day when she realized that she truly loved him back. Are you at that place individually? Are we at that place collectively as a church body where you can hear not the words of Christ saying, as you wish, but the meaning behind the words that says, I love you. Let's pray. Father, may we be challenged by the words of Solomon. May we be challenged by the experience of this couple, the ups and downs, the highs and lows, but the true relationship that they had with one another. The relationship that makes mistakes and yet works through them. The relationship that doesn't have to forgive. It chooses to never get angry in the first place. God, when we realize your incredible love for us as illustrated through this couple, what else could our response be? How can we choose to not love you back? May that challenge us. May you challenge us, and may your words challenge us. Amen.